What is the implication of the Kyoto Protocol expiring next year for countries like South Africa?
Well, essentially what it means is that no new projects will be able to be registered after 2012. There is currently an agreement with the EU ETS, which is the European trading system, that projects registered before 2012 from developing nations and projects registered after 2012 from least developed nations will continue to be eligible for their system. But it's uncertain at the moment whether there will in fact be anyone to register these projects and issue the carbon credits from them.
What sorts of projects have we registered to date here in South Africa? Are we meeting the spirit of the protocol?
I think we are. I think we were a little bit slow on the uptake. China, for instance, has over 2,000 projects. We only have 20, sorry. Those in South Africa, they tend to be your industrial type projects, your N2O abatement, energy efficiency, land for gas to energy projects. And we don't see any, in fact, large-scale renewable projects, which you tend to see lots of in China and India and Brazil.
Why have we been slow on the uptake there?
I think there was a lot of skepticism around the projects to begin with, around the system. It's been a learning system. It was always designed to be learned by doing, so we could understand how this system would work internationally. And I think South African project developers have been very hesitant to get into the market. There's also been fundamental economic drivers that have prohibited those projects from coming online in any event, such as a low electricity tariff, poor carbon, well, no carbon taxes and no sort of environmental legislation to force companies to take on those projects.
Do companies need to be forced to take them on? Does government need to take a more proactive role here in forcing companies to do this?
I don't think companies need to be forced to, but I think there needs to be enabling factors. One major stumbling block so far has been a lack of funding for these project developers. Project developers who wanted to build wind farms and hydro plants, solar plants, have been unable to attract funding for their projects because of the conservative nature of our lending organizations.
Are they also meeting red tape and bureaucracy and trying to set these things up at the same time?
It can be difficult, especially our EIA process takes very long, over 2 years now. There's also the requirements of BEE, which is most of these projects tend to be a majority of foreign investors with some South African sponsors, and it's very difficult for the foreigners to understand the concept of BEE and how to work with it.
Well, we do know that some moves are afoot. The government's proposed carbon taxes. We know that the JSE has been looking at potential carbon trading on the exchange. Do you think we're moving in the right direction here?
I think we are. I think we have to. I think going forward, post-2012, there'll be no more developed and developed nations. I think the United Nations and the European Union has also been very vocal on, they see that having two distinctions in the world is not enough. The BRIC countries need to have their own category because they need to take up their responsibilities in terms of combating climate change. And we can't rely solely on the developed world to fund everything.
Do you think we need a domestic market for carbon trading?
I'm not sure that we do need a domestic market. I worry about the liquidity that such a market would have with only 20 projects in South Africa and almost no demand for carbon credits from South African companies themselves. I think liquidity would be low. Where I do see value is to port an existing market into South Africa so that South African project developers could trade onto the exchange and European buyers could buy off the exchange.
Of course, this would also create awareness for companies, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. You see in Kenya that they've already established a carbon trading platform there for the purpose of educating people and providing a brick and mortar establishment for them to approach to trade the carbon from their projects.
And has that been synced in with international platforms?
It has. It links in with the EU ETS program and I think also with the Japanese program.
I mean, just looking at what your company's been doing to bring awareness of this, tell us more about that.
Well, Ecometrics has started with a program approach. So previously in the CDM you had a project approach where one installation of wind farms, for instance, would be one project. What we've done is we've established several programs that allow various projects to register once underneath us. So we do a once-off registration and they can add their projects to our program going forward through time. That reduces the cost significantly for project developers, which has been also a major stumbling block. It costs approximately $2.4 million to register your project. So we've now reduced that by an order of magnitude for project developers in Africa. And we're targeting the really high-value technologies, solar, renewable energies like wind and hydro, and land for gas.
I mean, you mentioned around Africa. Are you doing this continent-wide at this stage?
The first round of the programs is for Southern Africa. but we will expand it up through Africa as we move forward.
And what sorts of other programs? You mentioned the wind farm in Kenya. How about elsewhere in the continent? What sort of strides are they making in carbon trading?
I think Kenya is by far the leader in carbon trading in in Africa. Egypt is very strong as well. They have some very large wind farms that are registered, and they contribute the most in terms of carbon reductions for Africa. Uganda is involved with hydro projects, and there's various other small projects that's still in early stages around Rwanda and places like that.
And so what's the way forward for countries like South Africa in helping to build these platforms?
I think we need to consolidate the policy approach, because at the moment, as you said earlier, we have the carbon tax coming up, and it's very unclear how a international trading market will interact with the carbon tax, and I think it's important that it does. Otherwise, businesses don't really have options to reduce their carbon emissions where we have a sole electricity provider.
And does it have to be a policy that's coordinated by government and business and that has the buy-in of all sectors?
I believe so. I think we need to move away from a discussion with the UNFCCC that's purely policy driven and take into account the effects that it's going to have on business and invite business to partake in the discussion.
Do you think this also creates additional sources of revenue for governments around the continent, an extra source of revenue by investing in green energy and renewable energy projects?
I think it does, especially if you look to the markets, the tradable commodities. In South Africa, we've contributed through this mechanism 25 million euros to a clean development process. Now, I can see that in the next few years increasing by at least an order of magnitude within the next 5 years. So that's 250 million euros of free investment in South Africa.